It took less than 9 words to freeze the entire room. "You don't remember that?" Senator Dick Durbin asked, his voice flat, almost bored, like a man who already knew the answer. But what came out of Kash Patel's mouth next wasn't just an admission. It was the second shock, the one nobody saw coming, and it landed harder than the first. Because Durbin wasn't finished. He was just getting started. And the missing signature? That wasn't even the biggest problem in that document. The Hart Senate office building had seen plenty of tense mornings, but nothing like this. Word had spread through the corridors days earlier that Durbin's staff had been quietly requesting access to a specific Epstein-related document, one buried deep in the FBI's evidentiary chain. A document that, according to 2 separate sources inside the Bureau, was missing something it was never supposed to be missing. A signature. Not a redaction, not a classification stamp. A signature. For weeks, Durbin's team had worked in near silence. No press leaks, no teaser tweets, nothing. Durbin himself had told his chief counsel, "If we move too early, they'll have an answer ready. I want them walking in blind." His staff had cross-referenced chain of custody logs, compared signature pages from similar FBI evidentiary intake forms, and found something that made even veteran congressional aides go quiet. The Epstein-related intake document, the one logging the transfer and review of a specific batch of files, was missing the authorizing signature that federal protocol required, not an illegible signature. Not a smudged one. None at all. And yet, the document had been used, cited, and referenced in at least one internal FBI summary as having been properly reviewed and authorized. Someone had processed evidence that, on paper, no one had ever signed off on. Patel walked into the hearing room that morning with the same posture he always carried, shoulders back, jaw set. His staff had prepped him for the usual suspects, budget questions, January 6th, personnel issues, maybe another round of Epstein file demands. Routine, survivable. What his staff hadn't prepped him for was a senator who wasn't interested in talking points at all. The first 30 minutes passed exactly as expected. Republican senators lobbed friendly questions about violent crime statistics. Patel answered with the fluency of a man reciting numbers he'd said 100 times before. A few Democrats pressed on familiar Epstein-related transparency demands, and Patel deflected with his now familiar phrase about ongoing reviews and respecting the integrity of the process. Then Durbin's turn came. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lean into the microphone with theatrical urgency. He simply opened a single folder, slid one page out, and placed it face down on the table in front of him. "Director Patel," Durbin began, his tone almost conversational, "I'd like to talk about a document. Just one." Patel nodded, the picture of composure. "Of course, Senator." "This document," Durbin continued, "logs the FBI's intake and review of a batch of materials connected to the Epstein investigation. It's dated. It's stamped. It references case numbers that match files your bureau has previously confirmed exist." He paused. "But there's a problem with it." Reporters' pens stopped scratching. "It's unsigned," Durbin said simply. For a half second, nothing happened. Then Patel's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around his pen. A small motion the closest camera angles caught instantly. "Senator, I'd have to see the specific document to comment on—" "You'll see it," Durbin said, and flipped the page over. He held it up, not for Patel, but for the cameras first. Then he turned it toward the witness table. "This is an internal FBI evidence review authorization form, standard procedure. Every form like this requires a supervisory signature before the materials can be logged as reviewed. This one doesn't have one, and yet, according to your own bureau's summary report dated 3 weeks later, these materials were, quote, reviewed and processed in accordance with standard evidentiary protocol." He let that sit. 2 seconds. 3. 5. "So my question, Director, is simple," Durbin said. "Who signed off on evidence that was never signed off on?" The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It pressed down on the room. Somewhere behind Patel, an aide shifted, and a suppressed cough echoed off the marble. Patel's first instinct was the one that had worked for him in every hearing before this. Pivot to procedure. "Senator, evidentiary intake forms go through multiple stages of review, and it's possible that—" "It's not possible," Durbin interrupted, calm as ever. "I'm not asking you to speculate about what's possible. I'm asking you about a specific document with a specific date that your bureau cited as authorized. Either someone signed it and the signature disappeared, or no one signed it and your bureau processed Epstein evidence without authorization. Which is it?" Patel's jaw moved, but for a moment, nothing came out. The cameras held on his face. A bead of sweat, barely visible under the studio lighting, traced a slow line near his temple. "I'd need to review the chain of custody records before—" "You don't remember that?" Durbin asked. It wasn't rhetorical. It was a direct shot fired quietly, almost gently, and it landed like a blade between the ribs. And then Patel said something that no amount of media training could have prepared the room for. "No, sir," he said. "My priority is protecting the American public, not getting into the weeds of polygraphs, and to have a decent memory when you come before a committee." Reporters exchanged glances. The FBI director under oath had just dismissed the importance of remembering details about a missing authorization on Epstein-related evidence by comparing it to polygraphs, a word no one in the room had even mentioned. It was the kind of answer that didn't deflect the question. It amplified it. Durbin didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply repeated, slower this time, "Director, I didn't ask about polygraphs. I asked who authorized the review of Epstein-related evidence on a form that, according to your own bureau's records, was never signed." Patel's composure began to crack at the edges. His eyes flicked toward his general counsel, seated behind him. The counsel didn't move. "Senator, I want to be very careful here," Patel said, his voice noticeably tighter now. "I don't want to characterize a document I haven't had the opportunity to fully examine in this setting." "That's fair," Durbin said. And then, almost as an afterthought, he added the line that would end up clipped, captioned, and shared across every political account in the country within the hour. "But you had the opportunity to examine it 3 weeks ago when your bureau cited it as proof that everything was done by the book." Somewhere in the back, a phone camera's shutter sound clicked, then another, then a dozen at once. But Durbin wasn't done, because the unsigned form was only the first card. "Let's talk about who had access to this file between the date it was logged and the date your summary report referenced it," Durbin said, sliding a second document across the table, this one a printed timeline with names redacted, except for one. "According to the access logs your office provided to this committee, exactly one individual accessed this file during that window. Just one." He didn't say the name. He didn't have to. The way he said one individual carried its own gravity, and everyone in the room understood that the next question, whenever it came, would be about that name. Patel's hands, which had been resting flat on the table, now moved to clasp together, knuckles whitening slightly. It was a small gesture, but on camera, in that silence, it looked like a man bracing for impact. "Director," Durbin continued, "are you telling this committee that a single, unsigned, unauthorized access to sealed Epstein-related evidence is just normal? That this happens regularly and nobody thought it was worth flagging until a Senate committee found it first?" "Senator, I think it's important to note that. Is it normal, Director? Yes or no?" Another pause, longer this time, stretching like minutes on live television. "No," Patel finally said. "It would not be considered standard." And there it was. Not a confession of wrongdoing, not yet, but an admission that something about this specific file, this specific access, this specific missing signature was not standard, was not normal, was not supposed to happen. Durbin nodded slowly, almost sympathetically, the way a prosecutor nods when a witness finally says the thing the prosecutor has been waiting an hour to hear. "Then I think the American people deserve to know," Durbin said, his voice carrying now, filling the room without ever rising in volume, "why an unsigned, unauthorized, non-standard access to Epstein evidence was quietly logged as routine, and why it took a Senate committee and not the FBI itself to notice." Patel said nothing. Durbin closed his folder calmly, the way someone closes a book they've already finished. "I'll yield back the remainder of my time, Mr. Chairman," he said, "but I expect a written response to this committee within 10 business days, identifying who authorized access to this file, why the authorization signature is missing, and who reviewed the summary report that claimed otherwise. The record will so reflect, Senator. Thank you." But "thank you" didn't capture what had just happened. Because in less than 4 minutes, with a single page, a single quiet question, and one astonishingly tone-deaf answer about polygraphs, Dick Durbin had done something that hours of shouting matches in other hearings had failed to do. He had gotten the FBI director, under oath, to admit that something connected to the Epstein evidence chain was not standard, not normal, and not properly accounted for. Within the hour, clips of the exchange were everywhere. Polygraphs became its own trending term, mocked relentlessly online as the moment Patel seemed to dodge a direct question about missing Epstein paperwork by talking about lie detector tests nobody asked about. Commentators on both sides seized on the same 4 seconds of footage. Patel's hand tightening on the pen, the sweat catching the light, the long pause before, "No, sir." Legal analysts focused on something else entirely: the access logs, the single unnamed individual, the missing signature on a document that had been cited in writing as properly authorized. "This isn't about politics," one former federal prosecutor said in a cable news interview that evening. This is about chain of custody. If evidence in a case this significant was accessed and processed without the required authorization, and someone later wrote a report claiming it was authorized, that's not a clerical error. That's a question of who altered the record and why. The FBI's press office, which usually responded to Epstein-related inquiries within hours, stayed silent for nearly a full day. And somewhere inside the bureau, staff were quietly pulling every document connected to that file, checking one by one for missing signatures. Because if Durbin had found one unsigned form, the question on everyone's mind was no longer if there were others. It was how many. So now it's your turn. Watch that moment again, the hand tightening, the pause, the answer about polygraphs nobody asked for, and ask yourself, do you think Patel actually forgot who accessed that file? Or is "I don't remember" the easiest thing to say when the truth is something he's protecting, not forgetting? Drop your theory in the comments. Who do you think that one name on the access log belongs to?